Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic ReCon Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. This week's guest is another revert, another fellow revert, Mr. Tim Francis. Thank you, Tim. Good to see you.
Good to see you, brother. Happy to be here, man.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. What a privilege it is. So, we're going to get right into it so we can cover a lot of ground this evening. Let's start with how you grew up. What was home life like? What was your religious background like, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, yes. Man, we have a similar story as I was telling you, brother. So this is going to be fun to just chew on this. So I grew up in a small town in Ohio, called New Carlisle, Ohio. It's near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base between Springfield and Dayton. It's a town of about 5,000 people. Everybody knew everybody. I'm one of there's six of us. There's five boys and a girl. I'm second youngest, and it's literally like Little House on the Prairie type deal, meaning everybody knew everybody. Mom and dad, great Catholics. We ate dinner every night at 5:30, orderly. Dad was stern, mom was soft, but we grew up going swimming, playing baseball, loving sports, driving mopeds all over the town. No horror stories, didn't get involved in any kind of drugs, things like that. Just, really sport oriented, and working out, things like that. And I had to go to church. There was one church still there called Sacred Heart in New Carlisle, Ohio, and had to be an altar server, no choice. Not like a lot of kids probably, it's boring, you're into sports and all that kind of stuff. So um what happened is probably I don't know, I was probably a sophomore in high school, and my other one of my brothers was a senior, and my other brother had went to Ohio State, and we took a trip to see him at Ohio State. And that was like the big city, Columbus, Ohio State. I mean, it's huge. And I've always been a social nut, always been the outgoing kind of guy. And I just loved it. I just thought this is so much fun. Did things, I used my older brother's ID to get into the bar. Used to have to memorize the social security number to get in. And I just thought it was incredible. In fact, even though I was young, I'm the one that would go up and talk to all the girls and bring them over to, I never had any, I just enjoyed that kind of thing. So I think that kind of started it out. It started drinking with those guys, drinking too much, like a lot of kids. Didn't affect my high school years per se. But I think that was the beginning point, right? And then what happened is, um, I went off I made a decision I was going to go to Ohio State, right? I'm going to be, not because of, I mean, I took a degree in accounting, but I never had one accounting class in high school, right? Why did I go in accounting? Well, my brother was in accounting. I didn't care. I just wanted to go to Ohio State and party. And that's the truth, right? So I got there. I was behind from day one, if you will, in that, but just a good group of guys. Yeah, I say good, fun group of guys. And near the end of my there's a bar called Papa Joe's. It burned down in the 90s. Like if you Googled Papa Joe's, home of the bucket, the saying is that they sold more beer per square foot than any bar in the 80s. It was like literally famous, right? And I remember I was working there. I was going to Ohio State, my third or fourth year, and I was a bouncer, and the owner said, "Hey, Francis, come downstairs. This creepy old basement deal." And I went down there. I didn't know what was going on, and he was doing cocaine. He was buying cocaine, and I'd never even seen it. I didn't really grow up talking about it. We didn't have conversations about what it could do to your life. I didn't know anything about it ever. And the guy said, "Yeah, just take some of this and put it in your nose, and it makes you feel incredible." And that's really is how it started for me. And that that sent me on a tailspin all this time in college. So I was in the Air National Guard. That's how I paid for college. So once a month, I'd have to come home to Springfield, Ohio, and I do my guard duty, right? And so I have to go to church on a Saturday night, which I hated because I was hungover probably. I worked that day, and I'd have to go with mom and dad. I like seeing mom and dad, but I'd have to go to church. That's the only time, Eddie, I can remember going to church, right? So I'm away from the sacraments. I'm away from the church. One thing led to the next, and I get hooked on this cocaine, and that sent me on a really bad tailspin. Okay, right, and thankfully it wasn't right during college; it was near the end. So I did graduate. But what happened is it's weird how the devil opens up these portals because I went from never having done a drug to I did cocaine, acid, shrooms, um, you name it, and eventually it led to crack cocaine. And so, I have a real soft heart for people that are addicted and people, hey, what's wrong with them? I'm like, man, it can happen to anybody. In my book, I talk about Lawrence Taylor, the greatest football player probably that ever lived, and Daryl Strawberry, and one of the greatest baseball players, how they
Yep.
ruin their lives. So I totally get it because in the hood, and remember, I grew up in this kind of great little house on the prairie environment. I was never around this stuff. Next thing you know, I'm in the hood, um, crack dealers and all this kind of stuff. And in the hood, they call this stick, they call it the devil's stick. That's what they did there, the crack pipe. And I look back and I go, man, I totally get that. So all this happened. I got involved in this addiction, and simultaneously, what happened is I graduated. I was trying to figure out what to do, and I went down to Texas. I was chasing a business opportunity there, and I met my wife in a bar. My wife had no religious upbringing, none. In my book, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I talk about my wife. She was like a Miss Hawaiian Tropic. She was she only child. She used to wear stuff to the bar you don't even wear to the beach, kind of thing. You know what I mean? No religious upbringing at all. Her dad was a womanizer. So this is the background of that. So what happened is we got invited, and I know you can relate to this. We got invited to a big mega church. So this is the late 90s, but I've been away from church for a long time. I've got these addictions that are brewing, that are really looking to destroy my life. And we get invited to this big old mega church called Fellowship Church in Grapevine, Texas. So the pastor's name's Ed Young. And Eddie, growing up in New Carlisle, Ohio, I never saw a humongous mega church like that, right? And I couldn't believe it was even a church. It was like a concert, right? And so I wasn't against it. My wife had a theater background. She absolutely loved it. And I was like, cool. But the one reservation I had was I didn't want to just do anything unless it was true. In my life prior to that, I had chased, and I talk about this detailed in my book, I had chased some business opportunities that I really believed in, and it ended up not being real, if you will. So I had a little bit of skepticism. What I mean is, I wanted to know that Jesus Christ was not a Santa Claus story. Like literally, I thought mom and dad could believe it, but maybe this stuff is just all made up. Maybe they're just, making money off all this stuff. So there was a non-Catholic that was kind of mentoring us, and he gave me several books. One by Josh McDowell called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Have you heard of that?
I have. Yes.
Okay.
Through
And so,
through you. I remember it
okay.
was through you.
Okay, cool. So I had read that, and he had two books like that, and eventually I got the standard that used to be real popular in the 90s, with Lee Strobel, The Case for Christ. So I have Josh McDowell, Lee Strobel, and I'm getting excited that there's actual historical evidence for Jesus. Like, wow, okay, this stuff might be real. And I've never been around people that were so excited about the Bible, right? Like they mean, and so the guy says, "Hey, man, um, I want to get you in a Bible study, a men's group." And I'm like, "Really? Okay, cool." These were all like cool guys I could relate to. Not that you're not cool if you read the Bible, but I always thought of people who kind of nerdy if they were all into the Bible pushing. And these were all just a bunch of guys I could relate to. We worked out together. They were software engineers, salesmen, these kind of stuff. So, anyways, I'm in this Bible study, if you call it a Bible study, and I called my mom. Now, mom's like Mother Teresa, okay? My book is called From the Crack House to God's House, The Power of a Mother's Prayer. And through my book, you'll see over and over my mother's journals, okay? So my mother died, and I've got a lot of her prayer journals and letters. So you see that my mom is like, anybody who reads the book, they always say, like I had a girl last week. She's my wife's cousin, and she's a convert, and we were out together, and came up to me. She made me cry, and she was crying, and she goes, "I love your mother." Oh my gosh, she's going on and on and on. And so that was my mom. So I called my mom and I said, "Hey, mom, I'm going to church. I'm going to Wednesday nights. I'm in a Bible study." And mom said something like, "Do they have a mass?" And I was illiterate in about that stuff. So like I wouldn't know. Like when you said, do they have a mass? I don't even know that language. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, a mass. Like, what do you mean? Like that's really what I was thinking. Like I don't know. She knew they didn't, but do they have a mass? And she said, I just want you to know what you're giving up. Now you got to know. For me, I'm like giving up. My mom didn't know by any means. She knew I was in trouble a little bit, and you see that in my book through her prayers and journals and stuff, but she didn't know the details. And so I'm thinking, Mom, my wife and I just went from the bar scene to the Bible scene. Like we're listening to James Dobson. I'm like listening to John MacArthur. I'm listening to all those guys you know about, right? On the radio. Like, I'm like diving in. Like this might be real because I'm like, it's good and bad. I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. Like, so I'm like, and I got the guy I was working out with and working with, we started reading the Bible every single day. So Mom said they have a mass. I only want you to know what you're giving up. Now you'll like this, Eddie, because I know you just got back from doing the Journey Home show, right?
Hmm.
And so my mom has, if you go to my dad's house, I'm gonna be there shortly because Dad died, and we'll talk about that recently. And it's stacked up. You see VCR tapes, just stacked up and dusty of the Journey Home show and Mother Angelica, right? So that was my mom. And so Mom sent me a VCR tape, and it had about seven, if I remember right, seven of the Journey Home conversion stories on it. And for your listeners, I'm assuming they know, but if they don't, of course, the Journey Home is reverts and converts of people who came back to the church, and it's about an hour-long show. It's been on for I don't know what, 25 years, something like that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Close to
Is it? Yeah,
close to 30 now. Yeah.
30. And now his son does it. That's pretty cool. Mark is his son, right?
Yep.
So here I am. Get the picture. I'm really a kind of a football guy, not a Bible guy, if you will. I'm a party animal. The party never stops. Let's go. I'm gonna get rich. Carpe diem, seize the day. That's me, right? So here I am now with a girl that I think I'm probably gonna marry. I'm in Texas. We're going to a mega church, and my mom sends me this, and I'm listening to all of these really smart non-Catholic or ex-non-Catholics that become Catholic. And as you know, they're always telling the same story. I thought this, and then I read the early fathers, and now I believe this, and so on and so forth. But what I said, there's always two sides to every story. Like, I mean, there's got to be another side to this. So I said, how about if I have Scott Hahn and Steve Ray on this side, and then I have like James White and somebody else on this side? And what I meant is I wanted to have the best of the best on both sides. And that's really how I learned my faith, truly. It wasn't seminary. It wasn't reading the catechism. It wasn't reading the Bible. I learned the Catholic faith by becoming addicted to listening to debates. I was on a mission, and I wanted to be Catholic. In fact, my wife wanted nothing to do with the Catholic Church. It wasn't theology, it was the relationships. We went from the bar scene to the Bible scene. She loved all of our friends. They were great people, as you know, right? Really good, virtuous people. And so I started listening to debates, and I Father Mitch Pacwa, I know you know who that is. I just saw him recently. He's in my book. He used to teach at the University of Dallas, and so I had him come to my house, and my mom connected me to him, and help me get my son, and so he came to my house in 2001, and I had the leaders from Denton Bible Church come there, and we had like a 2-hour debate at my house, just me and them, and I fed them and I recorded it. And then I had Tim Staples. He used to work for the St. Joseph Communications. Now he's at Catholic Answers. And he came in for a talk, and I swooped him up. He came to my house, and I had about a 2-hour debate with these same guys. And I recorded it. I didn't know you could listen to transcripts or read transcripts. I really didn't. I didn't know this existed. So then I found out you could watch old debates online. So I get on this big, humongous deal, which I'm sure we talk about some of it, but the bottom line is I came to believe, against my wife's best wishes, that the Catholic Church was the most biblically and historically accurate representation of what Christ taught. I really did. Like I took notes like you wouldn't believe. I would pause the tape, outline it. I didn't know anything about the Bible. I'd go back up looking at every Bible verse they used. This took a couple years of really going through this because I was listening to the best Protestants you could come up with. I mean, truly. And then some of them arguments are complex. They're not as simple as they might sound. So I decided, okay, I think we should be Catholic. Well, my wife's like, no, uh-uh. I don't even relate to that church. We got all of our friends over here. He said, can't you just kind of bite your tongue? I mean, we're both Christians, that kind of thing. And the way I am, I'm not like that. I'm like, man, I'm not following something if it's not completely true. So this was a real tough time in my life. And Eddie, I was also still struggling. When you have an addiction, you don't just like, oh, it's gone. I mean, that might happen for some people, but for most people, it's one day at a time and it's just around the corner. So this caused a lot of issues with my wife, to say the least, and I. So early 2000s, I come back to the Catholic Church, and my wife's to make in order that we wouldn't get a divorce. I basically made a deal. I said we'll go to the Catholic Mass and we'll go to the non-denominational megachurch. So we were going to both. And my kid, who's now 23, at the time was young, he would say, "Are we going to the fun church or the boring church?" Right? By God's grace, that son today prefers only the Latin Mass. Now, I'm not here to debate Latin, non-Latin. I actually like the Norvis Order Mass myself because I can follow it and pray it easier for me. I go to Latin Mass. I love the sacredness. And so, if any of your listeners, I'm not into all that division about which Mass is better. I'm like, look, it's Jesus Christ. But my son loves the sacred. My point is, he loves the like sacred. And you know, it's amazing. It's by God's grace that he really appreciates what's happening at the Mass. So, all right. So let me bring this into here. So I'm studying this tape. I'm looking at this. I decided to become Catholic. We're going to both churches along this same time period. Now, this is where, in my opinion, the story gets good. Up to now, I don't know. It's pretty boring to me, but um, I'm still struggling with this addiction off and on. My whole social life since the time I was 14 or so, going up to Ohio State, if I go to a football game, I'm going to drink beer. Like I go to a party, I'm going to drink. That's what we do. We drink. Now, if you're listeners, I'm not saying you're wrong to drink, but if somebody's got a big addiction, it's probably not a good idea, right? But that's the way I understood social, right? Like, of course you have drinks, and I drink today, but you know, I'm careful, right? So, at any rate, here's what happened. My mom sent me another tape, and for your listeners, when you give them, I'm sure you'll give them my website at some point or link it to it. They've got to go there, if for no other reason. If they go to my website and click about, yes, you'll read something about me, but that's not why I'm saying that. You'll see the tape my mom sent me way back in 99. And I can't stress this enough. And I really mean this. Nothing like this has ever been filmed in human history. That's a humongous statement, right? 29 million people tuned in to watch this in 1999. It was called Signs from God, Science Tests Faith. The guy on the video, the host, was literally the father of Australian investigative journalism. He's the man. He's the Mike Wallace of Australia. He hated the Catholic Church. And you read about it, there's reasons. He hated the Catholic Church with a passion. He certainly didn't believe in God, and he did not believe in the supernatural at all. And the only reason he got involved in investigating with this show is because his neighbor, his attorney named Ron Tesserero, challenged him to prove it wrong. Much more to the story, but the bottom line is when my mom sent me that tape on a VCR tape, I didn't go to Catholic school, brother. I don't know about Padre Pio. I don't know about Faustina. I don't know about stigmatas and Eucharistic miracles. I've never heard of this stuff. So this is like 1999 when I first see this tape, and I witnessed a lady have the stigmata. Now, this is how naive and ignorant I was. I didn't know it had anything to do with the Catholic Church, even though they had a Catholic priest on the show. I was studying. I was listening to debates between Catholics and non-Catholics, and I knew all the arguments intellectually, right? And so when I watched the tape, I was excited for one reason, because I was like, oh my gosh, there's historical proof for Jesus, there's biblical proof for Jesus, and now it appears there's supernatural proof. A lady predicting and having, and it's all my tape on my website, for the first time in human history, from beginning until end, in front of the father of Australian investigative journalism, Stigmata, from beginning until end, predicted 2 months in advance, the exact day, the exact time. So I watched this, man, and I'm like, oh, it's like it'd be like if somebody sent you a tape of Bigfoot. You see what I'm saying? It just was like, oh my gosh. I'm not even practicing Catholicism, you follow? I'm just going, so if I knew you, Eddie, I had a VCR tape, I would go to your office, right, to your house, and I would put it in the VCR, and I would say, watch this. And it was like, I had like 30 minutes or more of the show, I don't know. And people always said the same thing. To this day, they still do. Oh my gosh, is that real? And I'm like, I don't know. I called the Fox television station. There was no book. There was no website. There was no part two. It was like, no, we can't give you we can't give this to you. Somebody owns the copyrights. So I'm like, in the back of my mind, never found out. I essentially had three questions. Is it real? Like, did it happen? Forget about religion for a second. Did this really happen? This lady's got the wounds of Jesus Christ in her head, feet, and hands for 3 hours, and they filmed it. They tested her blood, and the next day was completely healed, just like it was predicted. Is it real? The second question was, if it is real, how do I know it's from God? Like, it could be from another spirit, right? It's a fair question. And then the third thing was, if it is real and it is from God, what's my takeaway? Why is this happening? Why would God ever want or allow somebody to suffer like this? I mean, didn't Jesus do all the suffering so we don't have to? I know that's not the Catholic teaching, but that was my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to a Protestant church. They don't have Jesus on a crucifix. I don't mean to be rude. You know, they focus on the resurrection, right? You know, Jesus died for us, and that's what, you know, they don't like it when we have Jesus on a cross. So that's late 90s, early 2000s. What happened is I'm going to the Catholic Mass and I'm going to the mega church. I lose the tape. My mother dies. Driving down to Florida with my dad on retirement. My mother has a heart attack. I spent 17 days in the hospital. It's detailed in my book. And I'm like, what the heck? I mean, like, my dad waited 15 years for my mom to retire because he retired early for them to go on a vacation. And on the vacation, after waiting 15 years, while he's driving, my mom has a heart attack and dies. And I'm like, what is this crap? You know, what kind of God is this? That's my mindset. Okay. In the backdrop here, you have this thing I never have found out about with this stigmata, which leads into redemptive suffering, right? But I don't get this. God's unpacking this for me. You see this unfold. I keep mentioning my book. It's not because I think I'm not a writer, but the book details all of this, and you see God's hand in such a visible way. So, 2009. So mom gave me the tape in 1999. I lose it. Mom dies in 2004. 2009, so this guy calls me out of the blue, and he says, Tim, I was cleaning out my house, and you left a tape there. Now, I think guys don't do that. I think women do that. I think guys throw stuff out. I don't call my buddy and say, hey, I found one of your socks, you know. That's something my mom would do, you know. So this dude who doesn't even go to church, he goes, yo, Francis, man, I found something in my house. You left some Catholic stuff, he called it. And I went there. It's detailed in my book, and it was that tape of my mom's. So my mom died years before. And so I'm going, okay, this is mom on the other side. I always wanted to know what that was about, right? So I Googled. And when I Googled, I found this book called Reason to Believe. And it said it was officially launched by the head of Catholic adult education in Australia. And it was the guy who filmed the Stigmata. It said, this will tell you the whole story. And I was like, I got a hold of the guy from Australia, Ron Tesserero, and he is the horse's mouth on this, and also the Eucharistic miracle of Buenos Aires, Argentina. He is the primary source. He is the one who studied it. I'd never heard of this until 2009. So he sent me all of these raw videos, raw footage of the Eucharistic miracle investigation, a statue that's crying and bleeding, the stigmata. They filmed this lady. He filmed this lady, not they. He filmed this lady writing for an hour straight, the one that had the stigmata, without pausing one time, not once. And she wrote in Latin, Greek, Polish, and Italian. She only speaks Spanish. she never finished seventh grade. And when you read the imprimatur given by her archbishop, it is so flattering. It says stuff like, these are not pious words from a pious person. These are from our Lord Jesus Christ. And this is our archbishop. So, backdrop. I know nothing about mystics. I know nothing about this. But when I found the book in 2009, or it found me, and then I got turned on to the mystical messages from this lady. By the way, that's the whole reason she had this stigmata. If I can say it like this, that was the attention grabber. Anybody listening to this, whoever gets a hold of it, Eddie, you almost have an obligation to go to my site and watch the video my mom sent me, because that's what Jesus said to the lady. I needed to show the world my suffering through somebody like you. And then he said, I have messages to convey to humanity. And you know what he's told her? And this is all proved by the church. He said, I have never given anybody more on the Eucharist than you. He said, you are my missionary of the Eucharist. And there's an entire apostolate under the archbishop they started in Cochabamba, Bolivia. It's called the Apostolate for the New Evangelization. This is way before we're talking about a Eucharistic revival in the United States. So I'm backdrop. This is 2009. Who am I? I didn't go to seminary. I'm not some teacher. I'm just like, oh my gosh. So at the same time period, out of the blue, this famous investigative journalist and this attorney, I get connected to them, and they say, hey, we're coming back through the United States. They said, we're going to be, they were in Bolivia doing talks on the Eucharist at a Eucharistic Congress with the stigmatist lady and the bishop and such. And they said, we're going to be passing through the United States. Would you like to set up a talk in a church, Tim? Eddie, I've never done that. I don't know how the church works. And I said, absolutely. And again, this is all detailed in my book. I show you the email back and forth between us. And he says, I'll be there. Check this out. He says, I'll be in the United States. They were coming to see with this lady, the stigmatist. And they said, we'll be there September 8th, 9th, and 10th. He said, would you like to set up a talk? I said, sure. Now I'm in Texas. I've been here. That's where my wife's from, but I grew up in Ohio. My mom died, right? Dad's still alive. And I'm going, this is all about mom. So to honor my mom, we're going to do the first talk in Ohio, because I want all my brothers, all the people in my town, they need to hear, because I had the opportunity to take the man, the father of Australian investigative journalism from Australia, the guy that was on the tape on the Fox show my mom sent me 10 years before, and I'm going to bring him to a town in Ohio. I'm so pumped. I'm like, this is incredible. And guess what September 8th is? Blessed Mother's birthday. We didn't plan that. We weren't even going to film it. Some wealthy dude filmed it, right? We made a DVD. If anybody of your listeners want a DVD, I'll send it to you. You can just give me the shipping cost if you still have a DVD player. His story's amazing. This guy, amazing. So we filmed this. I host it. You don't see me on the DVD. They reference me. Hey, thanks, Tim, blah, blah, blah. And they say, Tim. Now, I'm a think big guy, right? They said, Tim, the priest said, he said, look, don't get your hopes up. During the week, if you had, September, it's on a Tuesday, he said 7:30 at night. If you had 50 people, you'd be doing well. The church would fit 500. So my dad, who's an old school farmer kind of guy, he don't get involved in technology and talking. He's traveling to all the churches. I made a zip code map of every church that connected to there. I called every single church. I didn't know how it worked, brother. I was calling every church and said, hey, you need to put this in the bulletin. I didn't know how it worked. Well, we had 750 people there, standing room only. We filmed it. We came back to Texas 2 days later, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Keller, Texas, the largest church in our diocese. And you can see in my book, I got a picture of this. That people were on the wall, 2,000 people. Yeah, you thought Scott Hahn was going to be there. And you have some dude named Tim Francis, who's nobody, of course. And you have these Australian guys nobody knows about. Why are they there? Because of this story. The same reason that 29 million people tuned in to watch Signs from God. Because people were fascinated with the supernatural, right? So I go, okay. And by the way, as soon as I started reading these little mystical messages, right? And reading them to my wife, we stopped going to the megachurch. One of the questions I had when I was going to the Catholic Church I knew all the intellectual arguments to be a Catholic. But here's what confused me. How come Catholics come late and leave early? How come at the megachurch they come early and leave late? They have 50 Bible studies going on. They're always trying to save people. There's nothing wrong with trying to save people, folks, right? And I was like, I'm confused. And then when I read these mystical messages, it got cleared up for me. And it was simple. It's something you already know. It's why they're having a Eucharistic revival now. But I learned this in 2009, that the vast majority of Catholics were ignorant. They're not bad people. They had no idea what they were stepping into. They didn't know anything about, for the most part, what's actually happening at the Mass, right? And we can get into that. So I went on a mission to say, these guys went back to Australia, and I said, I've got to share this. So I have a background in marketing and sales. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation, but I said, I don't want to just like tell people about this. I want to show it to them. So I put together my entire journey, if you will, from apologetics to crack to partying from Ohio State, up into meeting this lady, the lady who has the stigmata, who I spent hours with, to the guys who filmed her. And then so it's called Signs from God, Miracles in Their Meaning. So Eddie, I've been traveling since 2000, probably 10, all over the United States. People say, I never heard of this guy, because I'm not like working for anybody. I'm not on EWTN or Catholic Answers or whatever. I go to parishes, and for the most part, if they do the promotional plan as I tell them to, because I have a background in marketing, it's packed. We go way beyond the core, right? Because why? Because people are interested in the supernatural. Now, what happens at these events? Adoration lines triple, people going to adoration, daily mass doubles. I mean, just the sacramental and devotional life of the church goes through the roof. Priests tell me we had a confession lines the following week bigger than I've had since 10 years. We had too many people coming to holy hour. We need a bigger adoration chapel. Daily mass doubled in attendance. So I don't say it's because of me. I am so unbelievably privileged because of my mom. So I'm making up for lost time, which is why I finally wrote a book. I didn't want to write a book. I really didn't. My wife told me for years, write a book. I said, what am I going to write a book about? You know how many books there are about converts? There's so many amazing stories. But I'm so glad I did, to honor my mom. And I happen to believe it could be a great evangelization tool. One more thing I want to say before I forget.
Yeah.
Just today, literally, I was honored to put together these mystical messages approved by the church, 7 of them, about the Mass, about the Passion, about the last 7 sayings of Jesus. I've listened to Scott Hahn talk about the last 7 sayings, and I don't mean this against Scott Hahn. I love him. But let me tell you, this uneducated grandmother from Bolivia who gets the stigmata, she has this book called From Sinai to Calvary. It's in this book I'm going to talk about. It blows anything I've ever read or heard anybody talk about the last 7 sayings. It's the best commentary on the last 7 sayings I've ever heard from an uneducated grandmother that gets the stigmata. It's the best Lent tool you could ever have. I really believe that. So I paid to have it put in one book. It's just got put on my website today, and it's called Jesus Speaks. And I want that to go. I don't want that. Jesus, because I know this, because I've had these messages since 2009, wants this to go to the world because it leads people to the sacramental and devotional life of the church. By the way, that's what my mom did to me, right? God gave her a show with a lady having a stigmata. And through that, I got the mystical messages. And as soon as I read those messages, Eddie, guess what? Daily Mass, Holy Hour, the Rosary, all these things my mom wished I would have done when she was alive, right? And so, and again, that's why I wrote the book. I talked your ear off. Surely you have some questions or
None.
fill in some gaps.
No. You covered everything. No. I do have some questions. When you go back
Drill
to,
me, buddy.
yeah, let's go. Let's go. Fantastic. What's the website again? It's sciencetestsfaith.com, correct?
It is. And test is plural.
Plural. Tests.
Yeah.
Faith.
Yeah.
Yes.
2 things there. Go to About so you can watch the video my mom sent me.
Yep.
That'll blow you away. And then go to the store. There's 3 and only 3 books on there. One is it's called My Human Heart, and it's the attorney who filmed the lady have the stigmata. It's his grand poobah, if I can say that, of books. He wrote 3 books, and this is his latest, greatest. It covers everything that he ever did with the Eucharistic miracle, the testing. It is unbelievable. It should be like a New York Times best-selling book.
Yeah, this is amazing. I'm looking at it right now. Incredible.
You couldn't possibly read it. And when people read this, they go, how come I never heard of it? And I said, because there hasn't been a movie and because
Yeah.
Eddie hasn't got us on the big platforms. But now we do, brother. So, but then the other book is my book. It's called From the Crack House to God's House, The Power of a Mother's Prayer. Why is that good? Because you're going to see, I'm not saying this foolishly. I was a dirtbag, like literally. My wife's like, you are naked in this book. Not literally, but I'm like, I'm going to talk about all the stuff I got onto, and you're going to say, I don't mean I just drank a little bit. Okay. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're not dead. And then you see God's hand pulling me with my mom, because all through the thing, you see my mom's letters and journals, man. It's amazing. So it's a great book to give to anybody away from the church. I really do believe that. But then her book, Jesus' book called Jesus Speaks, this will be your most prized possession outside of the Bible and the Catechism. This will be it, especially with Lent. Nobody will put it down. They'll be ranting and raving about it, and going, this is unbelievable. And I go, yeah, it's Jesus and the Blessed Mother. And he gave her more on the Eucharist, and we are in a Eucharistic revival. And oh, by the way, look what our Archbishop has to say about it. You'll read it in the book.
Oh my goodness.
Multiple
Wow.
imprimaturs. Yeah, so it's awesome.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, I want to go back to the exposure, the first exposure to drugs. You
Yeah.
were at the in the basement, right, of that
Yeah, I was
bar
at
that
Papa
you
Joe's. He took me down to the basement and he was buying cocaine.
after the first experience, let's say, let's call it an experience. After the first experience, do you remember being hooked? I didn't catch that, or did it?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, it made me talk all night. I thought this was the most incredible feeling. And so every time I would have, once I'd done it a few times, every time I had alcohol, I wanted it. It's kind of similar. I don't smoke cigarettes, but people who try to give up cigarettes, when they start drinking, they want a cigarette, right? And so it's the same thing with that. It's like you just want it. I mean, I detail this in my book. You're like a dog, like you have a pet, you put that bone, you hide it somewhere in the yard, and the dog's digging, digging, digging. That's what happens to somebody who's addicted. It literally changes your brain, and everything else goes out of focus.
Yep. Yep. And so, dumb question, but I'll ask it anyway. You were saying you progressed into these other drugs. Is that
Yep.
purely because you hit a point where you said, okay, I'm not getting the same high? Or is it related to I want to be cooler? I want to get into the things that
It
these
really
guys are doing. Go ahead.
Yeah, it really truly had nothing to do with being cool. Like I don't mean this like arrogantly, but I was a core leader in my group. I didn't just do what everybody else did,
Sure.
so it's all curiosity. Somebody said if you took this little plant called mushrooms, you can see things. I said, get out of here. No possible way. I don't believe that for a second, right? And so I took mushrooms so I could see stuff. And I'll be darned. You betcha. I found out years later when I got really converted that the ancient church called drugs witchcraft.
Oh,
So I actually believe 100% that and I talk about this in my book, that you're tapping into a spirit world. 100%. Like, I'll give you one example. We sat there on mushrooms and we all saw a stuffed animal jump up and run across the room. Now, if I can't be imagining that if we all saw it, right? At one point, I looked in the mirror. I didn't know about the demonic world back then. At one point, I looked in the mirror when I was doing mushrooms. They say never look in the mirror because you see stuff. And my face went from my father to every one of my brothers to the most horrific looking, scary, demonic face you could imagine. And I remember that clearly, right? So I have no doubt that I was tapping in. I mean, Father Vincent Lampert, you probably
yep.
know who that is.
Oh yeah.
He did an endorsement on my book. I talk about I keep in touch with him, and he said that drugs and alcohol are a direct link. He said that's a direct link. It's like boom, short circuit, bring it in. Not that doesn't mean you're possessed, but you're inviting evil in like that. So that's what I was doing, like crazy.
I appreciate that background because I know that there are a lot of people that wonder about how does it truly happen? It's just one time and you get hooked, and
For me,
yes, it is
for
true.
me. But and I want to say, there's no question out of bounds for me. Like now, even as raw, I'm as
Yeah.
transparent as you can be. You know,
No, I
I think the more
appreciate
real
that.
you can be, the better.
I agree. I agree. Okay, so on that note, getting remind me how you finally you said it doesn't happen for some people, it happens at once or you end the addiction. Okay.
Oh, I could go back to it today. I mean,
Oh,
meaning if I was going out and we're
yep.
drinking Jack Daniels or something like that, and I get in the right environment, again, you know, those are triggers, right?
Yep.
So I'm never a person that goes, "Oh, I'm done with it." No, no, no. I go, it's like it's that's what I love about the Catholic faith. It's a battle between the flesh and the spirit. You know, I detail this in my book and you know the scriptures that Paul talks about. The one you choose becomes your master. So the longer you're away from an addiction, I don't care if it's porn, drugs, Facebook, Twitter, you know, TikTok, the longer you're away from it, the easier it is, right? Because one way to change a habit is probably the only way is to take a bad habit and put it a good habit, right?
Yeah.
So having that discipline, that prayer life, and everything else, but it's just around the corner. I've had many close incidences over the years because that's my biggest weakness is party, fun, social. Okay, my biggest weakness. You know, we could go on a Catholic cruise, and if they had music playing and drinking, I'd want to be having fun, and it could get carried away. I got to be careful with that because
Sure.
that was
Now, did the mega church appeal to you in part because of that atmosphere? I don't remember if you said that because I know you were invited, but do you think
I
that that had
I'd
anything to
already
do with it?
I'd already been through personal development seminars and all that stuff, so that seemed
Oh,
like
okay.
a personal development
Yep.
seminar to me. I wasn't against it. I mean, I'm always I'm pretty non-judgmental, probably because of my background. So I'm just like, cool, man. You know, the guy's trendy. He's got jeans and a cool hair and whatever. And he's as long as it's real, fine. You know, in fact, my dad, who's kind of an old farmer type, came down to Texas and we brought him to the mega church and he said, it's all about fun. I mean, that's all it is. And I thought, so what's wrong with that? Like, so what? Who cares? I didn't understand the mass. I didn't understand the sacrifice. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
if we had time, we'd love to talk about that. But go ahead, you lead. Tell me where we should go with this.
No, I we're going in many different directions. It's good. Okay, so you're at the mega church there, the fun. Oh, the fun. So with the temptations and making sure that you do not go out of bounds, I'm assuming the armor that you rely on is mass, adoration,
Oh,
confession. How,
amen.
okay, there you go. How important is confession in this process to continue
Everything.
with this
That's the whole
conversion? Yeah,
everything, brother. Everything. Funny, my mom in my book, you'll hear her writing letters and in her prayer journals telling us that she's constantly leaning on Saint Michael, the archangel. Fast forward, it's 2001, right? And I decide I'm going to come back, and I'm in Texas, not Ohio, some town called Euless, Texas, and the closest church is Saint Michael, and so I get my first confession in 15 years from Saint Michael. I didn't think about it then, right? Until I got my mom died, I got her journals and I saw this connection, and I that's why I'm so happy I put the book together because somehow, like I kept all of her journals and her prayer journals and her letters, and I didn't even know I'd read it myself personally. But then now I go, oh my gosh, I'm going to introduce my mom to the world. Like I really believe that, right? So confession in my presentation and y'all can Google, I'm sure people have recorded my presentation. By the way, if somebody wants to see a presentation for free, obviously, just email me from my website. I'll send you one, right? You can watch it. Um, and they change all the time, but it's somewhat similar. But you'll see confession is a huge deal. What is my protection, Eddie? The highest sacrament that exists, everybody, most of your listeners know this, but most Catholics don't, right? That's a strong statement. Most Catholics don't. If I asked you, what's the main reason to go to Mass? Most Catholics would say to receive communion. That's not true. Okay. It's not true. The main reason to go to Mass, by the way, you should receive communion if you're not in mortal sin, but in the early church, they didn't get it all the time. Even in my dad's day, my dad, who just passed away on All Saints Day this year at 89, he said when they grew up in a small town, he said everybody went to Mass. He said, but not everybody went to communion because they took it super serious, right? And so the main reason to go to Mass is to offer Jesus Christ to the Father as a sacrificial lamb and to offer ourselves as a living sacrifice. We don't have time to delve into that more, but that's critically important to know because it's all about the sacrifice, right? Our sacrifice and Jesus' sacrifice, offering it to the Father. And so it's not about whether I hear a good message, right? I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I think I heard that Padre Pio didn't even typically do homilies, but his mass was like 3 hours because it was all focused on the altar, right? The sacrifice. And so I say that because if, let me say it like this, I love working out. Okay, like my boys, I got 3 kids, 2 boys. I've coached football, basketball, baseball ever since they were little. My youngest is now 18. We finished our last year of football, but we work out every day together. Okay, and I say, look, check it out. When you work out, if you want to grow, you got to eat right. You got to take the right supplements, right? You got to nourish your body. So if you want to grow spiritually, our nourishment is Jesus Christ. I know you know this, but he said, if you eat my flesh and drink my blood, I live in you and you live in me. Like I have shirts to say that, right? I'm like, this is it. So what if you really believe that? If people really believed that they were feeding their soul, just like, could you imagine saying, hey, I need to have a productive week this week, Eddie, but I'm not going to eat unless you were doing some great fast. I'm saying for most people, they say, no, 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 I got to eat. I need energy, right? But people wait, and I don't mean this rudely, people wait a whole week to go to mass because they actually don't understand and grasp the supernatural food. Because by God's grace, we can receive him every day, right? But even if you can't receive, you can get tremendous graces by participating and praying the mass and offering Jesus to the Father. And I know your listeners know this, but it's not supposed to be fun, right? No, it's a sacrifice, right? So that's without the mass, without confession, right? Yes, I pray the rosary. Yes, I go to holy hour every week, but those are devotions. I could pray a million rosaries, okay? Wouldn't compare to one mass, right? That's the sacramental grace that feeds my soul. It's like me wanting to work out, but not eating and taking supplements. I'm not going to grow, you know? And so, anyways, yeah, man, my whole mission in life is to introduce the world, and I know that's yours too, to introduce the world to the sacramental and devotional life of the Catholic Church, truly, and to learn to pray the Mass from beginning until end, whether that's the Latin Mass or the Norvis Ordo Mass. So yes, it's the sacramental devotional life of the church. That's my protection, 100%. If I don't keep it up, I'll get divorced. I'll go back to using probably. It's impossible because the enemy's so strong, the culture's so strong, right? And without that, man, I got no chance. I really believe that.
Wow. What else did you want to cover about the book that came out? Remind the audience of the name of it.
Yeah,
And
you got it. Well, let's just start with this to
yeah.
say, um, on my book that I wrote came out about a month ago. I never wanted to write a book, but I'm super glad I did. And I do think that you can take this book and it'll give you hope. If you have loved ones away from the church, it'll give you tremendous hope, but it'll also give you a tool that is the person that's not all clean cut or whatever, or they're away from the church, whether they're going to a mega church or they quit going to church at all. I'm going to take them through a journey, a detailed journey, as I say, from the crack house to God's house, from Ohio State to the party life to the mega church, my experience there. I mean, I didn't go into that. All the discussions I had in the mega church with the pastor, all the dialogues I had about the faith in digging and digging. I still do that today. So that's a great resource. The other one that I mentioned, Jesus Speaks, just got put on the website today, man. This is Jesus Christ. He allowed this lady to experience the stigmata for the first time ever in human history from beginning until end. And 29 million people watched this. Again, you'll watch this on my website. And he did it, he said, because I have messages to convey to humanity through you. And the whole goal is to lead people to the sacramental and devotional life of the church, the sacramental life. That's the entire mission, right? So I've kind of been on a Eucharistic revival since 2009. When the bishops started talking about we need a Eucharistic revival, I'm like, Captain Obvious, 100%. People said 70% of the people don't believe in the real presence. And I'm like, I'm shocked that you're shocked. 70% of Catholics don't even go to Mass. How could you be shocked about that? They're not bad people. They just need to be woken up. And I'll say one more thing. People don't want to be catechized. Everybody's talking about catechesis. People don't want to be catechized unless they've first been evangelized. And what this information that I am massively privileged to share, both at presentations and videos and in books, is the best pre-evangelization tool on the planet. I've never seen anything like it. And my good buddy who works for the Augustine Institute, his brother helped launch Lighthouse Catholic Media. If he's here today, his name's Brian Truckerbird, he would tell you they've got access to every present presenter under the sun. He says, there's nothing like this. It's not because of me. It's because we're able to show this stuff. And listen, Eddie, people don't leave. When I do a presentation, man, because it's a big multimedia presentation, I show video, I do this, I show this, I go here, I show this. They're not moving. They got to pee. They don't even want to move because it's like being in a good movie, right? And they come out of it, and I've got about 10,000 feedback forms, literally, from the last 14 years of traveling. I used to take my family all over the United States. My wife, this model that was, immodest, living in the world as most you can live in the world. She wasn't a drug addict. That's the good news. She decided to homeschool my kids. So we traveled in a conversion van all over the United States for years. That's detailing about going from parish to parish to parish. And we barely scratched the surface. I don't remember why I brought her up. I forget it. But yeah, you need to get those books and give them to people, read them. I mean, there's a million great books. Of course there is. There's definitely 100% no book in the world like Jesus Speaks. And you know what? The guy who published it's a Baptist. And he said as much. You'll see him in there, Lee Fredrickson. He said, this needs to go to the world, Tim. I said, this is so Catholicly, but you're a Baptist. He said, you can't read this. He goes, I've been in book publishing for 30 years. He goes, I'm connected to 80,000 Protestant pastors. He goes, you can't read these words and not think they're from Jesus. And I said, don't you know they're from a lady who never finished 7th grade? And don't you know that's how God works, right? He picks who he picks.
Unbelievable.
That's his secretary.
Oh my goodness, Tim. Love it. Absolutely love it. Anything else you want to say to the audience before
What
we
should I say?
Yeah, what should you say? Okay.
You know your audience. You know who's your audience.
Okay, there are several
Bunch of Mormons?
there are different demographics here. But one that I continually think of is a group that would not comment. They're discerning the faith, and the last thing they're going to do is comment or let anyone know that they're watching. So it's secretive. Okay, so there are people that have written to me about this.
Where are they coming from?
Anywhere,
predominantly,
all over the place. I'd say, there are a lot of people that are coming from the South. I'll just say
no. I don't mean geographic. Sorry,
Yeah.
I mean non-denominational. Are they atheist? Are they predominantly?
I'm just thinking over the years, a lot of non-denominational for sure. I don't know how people find the channel,
Hey,
but I would start there. I would start there. The theology is a little bit of a moving target, I'm going to say.
I got it. No problem. Listen, if you're non-denominational, first of all, man, I love you. Okay. And I would rather be a non-denominational going to heaven than a Catholic going to hell. So I don't in any way think that if you're Catholic, that means you got the golden ticket. But listen to me. If you would be open, I've got lots of non-Catholic friends. My future son-in-law is his parents are a long line of Baptists. Okay. And I've just been taking him lovingly through the information, asking him to reach out. And I've been reaching out to all the Baptist pastors I can to get the best answers for him to my questions. So I would just suggest to you that you would I'm sure you already have read a lot of good conversion stories and stuff, But true, I'm not just trying to sell you a book, okay? But truly, truly, first, just read my book, From the Crack House to God's House, because I'll take you through my journey, which I didn't have time to today, to go into all the conversations I had and all the discussions about the non-denominational, because that was my bread and butter. That's what I lived in. The differences, and I know there's differences, but there's some commonalities. The non-denominational megachurch loved Christ people and the Catholic faith and their teachings and their practices. It's not about the people. And I think what you'll end up um, looking at is, first of all, do you believe Jesus Christ is real? Oh, yeah, yeah, of course I do. Why? I just do. He touches my life. Okay. But and there's nothing wrong with that. But I can tell you there's historical reasons to believe it. There's evidence to believe in Jesus, truly, right? The second part is, and this is important, if you want to follow Jesus and you want to have a relationship with Jesus, don't you think it would be important to find out what Jesus taught? And you're like, of course, that's why I read the Bible. No. There was no Bible. There was no put together Bible for like 400 years after Christ, resurrected. Okay. So what Jesus taught, right? Everything he said is the word of God. So if you could find out, and I'll lead you to this, that what Jesus taught his apostles and what they taught their disciples, like John had a disciple named Ignatius, right? So if you wanted to know what Jesus said, I know we got to end here, Eddie, but if you want to know what Jesus said when he said in John 3:5, Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, and he said, unless a man is born of water and spirit, he can't enter the kingdom of God. And you're going, well, what did he mean? Well, if you wanted to really know what he meant, do you think if you could talk to John's disciple, Ignatius, or Irenaeus, who was a disciple of Polycarp, if you could hear from them how they understood Jesus' words, and if you found out that the things that the ancient Christians believed, what they believed, how they practiced, was what the Catholic Church practices today, if that would matter to you, which I think it should, because Jesus said, I'll lead you to all truth, right? And so if you find that out, you will find that there's treasures that many Catholics, are unaware of. Don't judge the Catholic Church by Catholics. What I mean is, judge the Catholic Church by the daily Mass people. Judge the Catholic Church by the saints, right? St. Augustine, right? St. Mother Teresa. But you'll find out that the ancient church, the entire center of worship was on Jesus Christ. It was not on the personality of a pastor. It was not on somebody who could speak good. It was always about the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the altar. And don't worry, he's not dying again. He only died once. It's a perpetual sacrifice. And when Jesus said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. He said, if you eat my flesh and drink my blood, I live in you and you live in me. The ancient church always understood that to be the Mass. And that's the most important thing I can convey to you, that you want to have Jesus Christ in you. You read about him, you have the word of God, and you can do that in the holy sacrifice of the Mass. So it's the biggest thing I could say, brother.
Beautiful, Tim. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for being so candid. And uh,
Thank you, dude.
send me all the links. So put them in the description, and we'll make sure that a lot of people know about your great work. Really, really appreciate the time.
We got to get together, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll meet midway. I don't even know where that would be, but
Oh,
we'll figure
okay.
it out.
We'll
God
figure it
bless
out.
you.
All right.
God bless
God
you.
bless you, brother.
Thank
Thanks.
you, everyone, for listening and watching. Until next time, take care and God bless.